Russ, I will pass it over to you. Take it away and just give us a little bit of background on your experience, how you got where you are now. And then, as I say, this class is so good about questions and follow-ups. And so I'll give it to you and you can take it away and just kind of talk about your experience and your background.
Okay, great. Thanks, Betsy. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me here and for allowing me to do it on day 10 of a 15-day road trip where we go to 7 cities. We're kind of doing this little tour starting with Houston, Atlanta, Miami, Orlando. I'm in Charlotte today. We're in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, in Boston, and then fly back to Portland after that. And it's interesting you asked how I got to where I am. I wake up several mornings and say, how did I get here? Because I found myself last year just going through a huge life change. And it's interesting, a lot of the folks who direct NBA basketball, they're more freelance, and we can talk about the differences later on. But Portland wanted a full-time person, and so given that I just recently left the Broncos, I was doing some work for the Chargers during their season. I thought, well, why not? We'll see how that goes. And it is a long trip each year to go through this, but all is good. I will say from the very beginning, I'm a little bit unusual in that I was really focused when I was young on wanting to go in television production. I grew up in Chicago. I was weaned on Cubs games and always had to come home and watch them, and always thought that I wanted to be a part of that kind of production. I realized I wasn't going to be in front of the camera. That wasn't how I was built, at least in my mind. And so I continued to press on through college. I went to Bradley and got experience there. My son, who's also in the business now, he works on the Big Noon Kickoff. He does professional bull riding. He does Pacers games and Reds games and all sorts of things. I gave him this advice too, and that is to, when you're at your university, get into an area where you can get some experience, and it's so different than when I was in school, so different than when I taught, in that so many schools now have these programs to support productions that are on ESPN Plus or in-house or whatever it might be. So the first advice is, while you're there, and I know a lot of you do this, is get the experience you can, make those connections you can, make mistakes while you can, and really prepare yourself to do that. And there are several points within my life I had to kind of refocus where I was headed, in that out of undergrad, I didn't get a job in production. I went back to grad school at Southern Illinois University, and right out of that, got a job at Miami of Ohio, where I put together a TV truck and was just doing productions as a 24 or 5-year-old. I was just making stuff up, but we were doing all these like ESPN3, ESPN Plus productions well before we even had the opportunity. Well before that was a common practice. Did that, ended up after that teaching at NKU. While I was at NKU, I got, as Betsy mentioned, experience as a part-time person directing news at a couple of stations, and then also getting involved in productions, most notably the Reds. Kind of fast forwarding a little bit here, was at NKU for a long time, 13 years, and got tenure, and did something nobody ever does when they get tenure, that's leave. The Reds hired me to consult as they were building a new stadium. I helped get them through the process for their production facility. They then wanted me to come full-time and run their in-house production, which I did for about 5 years. Then I went on my own as a freelancer, produced, directed for the likes of Big Ten Network, ESPN, Fox Sports, Ohio, whoever would hire me. Then the Broncos called in 2016 and asked if I'd come work for them full-time, which I did. Left them in the fall or in the summer, and it was such a blessing to instantly get a job with the Chargers as a freelancer, and then this full-time job with the Trailblazers. So it's been crazy. I haven't stopped since the end of August, but it's a great journey. It's fun if you like variety. It's awesome. I've done a variety of sports: baseball, hockey, basketball, football, of course, lacrosse, soccer, volleyball. Did all sorts of productions, and just love the variety that we have. And each day is new, each day is different. And that's what kind of fuels me today, is continuing on to do productions, each show trying to make it the best we can. And I've done various roles within production, but really love directing A lot of people get excited to sit in a little room and edit stuff and see it all come together. That bores me. I would rather see it come together live when you have one chance, one opportunity to do it right. So that's kind of the quickie of where I got to where I am today, in a hotel in Charlotte. So
Russ, tell us about your experience that you mentioned about directing the news, directing in the Reds broadcast. What did you pick up in your early experience that really pays off now to what you're doing with Portland?
yeah, so I think every time you really have to understand this, which I didn't when I was younger, but everything we do is about storytelling. Every camera cut, every angle, every zoom should be telling some story. And it's really important. We've got great tools to be able to do that, and it's lost on us sometimes, but we are always kind of we obviously, in doing live, you work with an entire crew of people who all have to have the same goal and rowing in the same direction. But along the way, I picked up that pacing is important, timing is important, and everything you do reflects a story that you want to tell. And so in television, the producer is really the content person. That is, he or she will be the one who decides what stories are we going to tell that day. I call him the chief storyteller. And examples I saw a little bit this weekend of the North Carolina State basketball game, and it was clear to me the story they were telling. And sometimes you go into, by the way, into a game wanting to tell one story, and then the game reveals what the real story is going to be. And for that, watching NC State, that story obvious to me was DJ Burns, and how much the cameras focused on him and showed him smile and love for the game and showing his family. That became their story because he became such a lovable character in this game. And so we have to, okay, what's the story? Let's tell it the best we can. And then I think there are ways of overtelling stories. Here's one I'm not a big fan of, and that was the whole Taylor Swift Kelsey kind of a thing. That what's the over under of how many times they're going to show her in the suite today, and the circus that was around that, to me. But sometimes we have different goals, different visions, different ideas. To me, that got in the way of storytelling. But to the folks at NBC and Fox and whoever, that became the focus of their story. To me, it got in the way of the story. But you go into it and you start by telling stories. I can share with you in a second a rundown I have here, but the producer puts it together. It's a roadmap of where we're going to go. And then we see what happens. We don't know before the game starts who's going to be the star, who's going to make a great play, who's going to be the GOAT, as in not greatest of all time, the one who made the biggest mistake or whatever. And we got to tell those stories. And so as a director, I'm the one who executes the storytelling. The producer tells us what he or she wants the focus to be, and then I use the tools in front of me and the people who are assigned to work with me to tell that story the best that we can. And then in the whole producing thing, just kind of to put a bow on this, there's an executive producer who works at all of the streaming services, the networks, the regional sports networks. That is a person who looks at the overall content. Here's what our stories are going to be. Here's what we're going to cover. Then there's a game producer who determines, for this specific matchup, what are we going to do? And then even within those shows, you kind of have, and this is good entry level kind of position, you have a font coordinator who's also a producer. That's all about graphics. What stories are told on the screen with graphics, with words, with pictures, with charts, with graphics, all that kind of stuff. And so there's a font coordinator who works with the producer, puts those things together, and they determine the best time to display those. There's a lot of people watching sports in a bar, and so there's a lot of content we want to put on the screen because they can't hear what's going on. So that's another producer role. My show doesn't, but other shows have a replay producer, somebody who just sits back in the replay room and determines, okay, what packages are we going to put together? This person, Shaden Sharp, no, he's not having a good game. He hasn't played in 5 months. So let's say Delano Banton's having a good game. They'll put together a package of highlights, and then we tell the story. Look, he's on a pace for a career high, or look at his defense. So there are a lot of people who, at the end of the day, It's all about telling stories. And my role, I love directing so much more than producing. And my role is I have one opportunity to get it right because they're not going to redo the pitch or redo the kickoff or redo anything because I missed it. So I have to be on my game and have to always be engaged, again, to execute what the producer wants us to do.
Hmm. And you touched on this a little bit, and we have talked a lot in the class about how content is king and how
Yeah.
fans want more and more and more. And especially at this time, it seems as if because of the regional sports networks, because of what the networks are doing, because of teams taking back their rights and just going to what we call terrestrial television, put up the antenna and you can get those games on the air. They're taking over the content themselves. It seems as if now there are more opportunities than ever between streaming, between cable, between over the air. There's so much going on because fans want content. You cannot give them too much content if you're a fan.
100%. And as I thought through this, we kind of are in the golden age of sports production. It's the only thing keeping satellite and cable services alive, really, because most of the content we can get streamed. Sports is now becoming more and more streamed, and sometimes you have to go away from your cable provider to do that. And then there's others who are going, as you said, kind of back to the future. The Phoenix Suns this year gave out at their first home game 10,000 antennas because they no longer had a regional sports network. And so that was their arena giveaway
That's
so that their
brilliant.
fans can
Actually,
watch,
that's
right?
brilliant.
And Utah Jazz went to over the air. And we and other teams are going to be facing that soon as Root Sports disappears. AT&T Sports already disappeared. And so you've got the Colorado Rockies now who are trying to do an over-the-air deal. Meanwhile, the league steps in and they're streaming their games where they can. But I call it the golden age because there is a thirst for live content. There's so many college games on. It was amazing if you were to go through leagues change their games to Thursday nights for a Thursday night football game in college or a Wednesday night. I think the MAC it's a weird day. I don't know if it's Tuesday or Wednesday, but a day when there's no other football historically.
It's
They've changed
Tuesday.
it on then.
And the theory
It
is
is Tuesday. Yeah.
because, yeah, and the theory is because at least in the past, so many students who attended MAC schools in Ball State, I'll use that as an example because I went there, these kids would go home on the weekends, whether they had a job or whether they just lived close. So they would go home on the weekends, so they would not be there on a Saturday, but they should be there on campus on a Tuesday. So that's really how that got started. And plus, nobody else was playing football that night. So, the MAC games kind of settled into Tuesday, and that's where they are.
Right. And the what's it called? The United Football League, whatever, just started last week. It's for those who want more football out of the football season. So there's that thirst. I did a high school for a long time, high school game of the week. I did it for Fox in Cincinnati. I did it for station in Columbus for a number of years. And for me, it was actually a great trip. I was in Northern Kentucky. I'd drive to Columbus on a Thursday, do high school football, continue on to Cleveland to do the Browns that weekend. So for me, anyway, it was convenient. But in addition to that, we see this year, Betsy's all over this about the explosion of women's sports. And now it's coming up as far as record viewership and record advertising and things like that. And then if you're just really weird and flipping your channel around because you're bored, you'll find things like slam ball and cornhole and ultimate disc and frisbee golf and all these things that are live content that are all over the place. This guy runs camera for me at home for the Trailblazers. He directs a number of frisbee golf tournaments. And so what's the distribution? Well, we talked about over the air, the traditional way to do it. Of course, we then get the big networks like ESPN and Turner. And then you have others like Prime. Apple TV has the exclusive MLS contract. And that's, I don't know, 2 years now running. So if you want to watch MLS, you got to get Apple TV. Peacock had a couple of exclusive games for the NFL Network. Netflix is kind of coming in and out. I think they have a tennis agreement. I'm not sure, but they're not sure yet what they're doing. But you've got these streaming services. You've got ESPN Plus, which relies on the universities to produce content for them, so that if you went to a very small school, you'll find their baseball game on. It might be a 2-camera show, but it's on, and you want to follow that, you can follow that. And then, of course, a lot of the leagues have their own apps, their own channels. And then taking a step further is that you've got all these social and digital channels, whether it's YouTube, Barstool Sports, FanDuel, Bleacher Report. All of them have now this sports content, boxing, the wrestling, different leagues that they have for that. And as I said earlier, leagues and teams have their own apps. And so there is this constant more content, more content, more content, more content, more content. And it kind of leads to, which is good news for you all, is that leads to more opportunities. And again, those opportunities don't happen after you graduate. In my opinion, they should happen before you graduate. So you are a little more marketable. You have some experience from some good things. You've learned some bad things. And you develop your own style of how to do it moving forward.
Any questions that we have? Anybody's got a question? Jake, go ahead.
Much for hopping on. I had a question. You talked about having your game producer, and one of my go-to questions throughout the semester has been, how do you build that connection? The producer to director connection is so huge, especially when you want to get to a replay. Hey, I'm thinking of font in this. How do I want to tell the story? And almost having that idea of where you want to go that aligns with your producer without even having that conversation sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jacob. It's not easy. It's not automatic. This year with the Trailblazers, it's the first year. I filled in and did Cavs games a few years ago, but I had not done NBA in a long time. The producer that they hired has never done the live sports of the game. He was a studio producer and doing like NBA Today for ESPN, things like that. So we are 75 games in and still trying to figure some of that out. You want to get to a point where you read each other's mind and you trust each other. I think because of where we each came from, that has been a long developing relationship. And that, yes, I have to understand his tendencies and hope they're consistent. And as he is newer to that, they're not always consistent. So I'm thinking, oh man, he always loves to do this, I'm going to do that. And, left turn on me. And so, producers really have to trust their directors. And some producers want to control absolutely everything and don't like to give up any kind of freedom in a broadcast, don't want to cede that control to anyone, but good producers will. And you've got to have that working relationship to be able to kind of understand where they're going to go next. And it just comes mostly with working together. I've done so many one-offs here and there with different producers that, especially the ESPN things that I was doing early on, ESPN3, etc. Each week I'd have a different producer, or I'd have to produce it and direct it myself. And you just have to go into those circumstances trusting that your director understands the storytelling process and knows what you want to accomplish. The times when you struggle is when the producer holds on to that and is trying to do your job, and then they forget about theirs. And I've experienced that before too. Too busy telling me what to do that they forget to cue up their soundbite that the talent just threw to, and now we're sitting there going, and he's or she's panicking. So, but you bring up a fantastic point that producer and director have to be aligned. Again, the producer, in my opinion, and same with news, the producer figures out the stories and the order and all that, and the director has to keep the trains running on time. In live sports, there's a little more creativity to it with shots and cutaways and all that, and you don't want to miss the action. But you absolutely have to be on the same page, otherwise there's disaster. So if you are a producer, my opinion as a director, you have to cede some of that and trust your director instead of trying to micromanage your director. And I think that leads to the best results. You just have to trust each other.
Any other question real quick? I think, Russ, that also goes between talent and the director, because I know I have worked with directors who either were new at it or didn't understand that connection. And it makes for a tough ball game if you have a director who really does not want to work with you and has the meetings and kind of talks about what the day is going to look like, what the game is going to look like. So walk us through, like today, walk us through your routine, the meetings, what you talk about, what you're planning, even before you get to the gym, even before you really get to what you're going to be doing tonight at the game. What will you be doing and what will you be talking about as you go to make sure that the production, that the game, everything goes smoothly? So go through your game day routine.
Sure. And I have a rundown I can share if
Yeah.
you allow me to share screen. I click on it and it says host won't allow you to, but if I can share that, that is our roadmap. Even though this is live, it is definitely our roadmap of how to get there. There we go.
Got it?
Select a window, that one. Yep. And I'll click on here. And so you guys see this part here. That is that's a rundown that's put together. This one was for our game that was in Orlando just a couple of nights ago. And so that's what it starts with, is the roadmap. I mean, clearly it starts, I shouldn't say starts with that, because there's always research. You know, whenever I was doing a game that's a one-off, you got to do a research to find out who the stars are, who you're going to highlight, who you're going to talk about in the very open, and things like that. And so we have several of these. We have also a pre-game, halftime, and post-game show. All of them have a rundown. And one of the really nice things that was done this year in Portland is we've integrated those as much as possible. So from going from the pregame show to the live action, there's a very quick handoff, not 2.5 minutes of commercial, and then it seems like a separate production. But I don't know how well you can see this rundown on your computers, but we start off here with the different blocks, and then we talk about, we have the show open, and it says here, high post. That's our control room back in Portland. So they're running the show open. And so we start here with a video that has scenics of Orlando. We decide that the first thing our talent's going to talk about is DeAndre Ayton, and then Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, and then Jabari Walker. So when we come in, here's what our show looks like. Hey, welcome to Orlando for this great matchup, blah, blah, blah. DeAndre Ayton has now played 2 games since his injury, and he's got to go up against Banchero, and Wagner is their leader. And for us, Jabari Walker's going to have to shut down Wagner. And then the 2-shot of Kevin Lamar, we come on camera. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our game. Blah, 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 blah. And then we have a keyable full screen is what this says. And it's how good the Magic defense is. So, how are we going to score? How are we going to exploit that? And I'm going to step back like a half a step and let you know a couple of things. One is, if you're a broadcaster for a team, or if you are, whether it's freelance or full-time, you definitely have a team bias. You have to. It's your opportunity to tell stories. When I produced Bengals preseason TV, I only cared about the Bengals. I've said this time and again. I didn't care about the 11 guys on the other side of the ball in a preseason game. The reason our fans are watching, they want to see who are the new guys you got in free agency, how are the new kids that you drafted looking. And so that's what we're going to focus and highlight, because I think, in my opinion, that's what they care about. And so it's inherently biased as being a team broadcaster. I'll tell a bad story about the Cincinnati Reds, with them being on Fox Ohio or Bally Sports. They have for years, and I used to do the studio show for them, pregame and postgame. I would direct that. And they were just bad. I mean, really bad. And so the producer, who Betsy knows very well, would want to say, hey, yeah, boy, this bullpen blew a lead for the 5th day in a row now. Well, you say that, and all of a sudden you got ownership calling and telling you to be more positive. You shouldn't be negative in the show. And so you've got to have this balance. And I hired a young woman when I was with the Broncos, and I said, Alexis, you don't need to be cute. You need to be credible. And when I talked to the Trailblazers, I said, hey, you know what? to me, the most important thing is credibility. Your audience knows, your viewers know if you aren't very good. So don't be a shill. Don't pretend they aren't. Be honest, be credible. Because if you're not credible, then maybe you don't get the audience. Because like, well, why should I listen to them? They're just telling me fairy tales. And so credibility to me is the most important thing, even in sports productions. And again, when you're working for a team, my opinion, I can't say, boy, the Reds bullpen, boy, they're just unlucky. They're really good, but they're just unlucky. And here's some more dirty laundry. When I was with the Broncos, I put together a TV and a radio studio. I was using our radio partners to do a YouTube hit 3 times a week. It was 5 to 10 minutes. We had new management come in, and these radio guys said, oh, yeah, it was great that the Broncos brought in this quarterback to push Russ Wilson. Well, I got called into my new boss's office, who said, you can't be saying that about our star quarterback, that he needs to be pushed. And it's like, well, he does. And again, for me, this is why I have a lot of different jobs. Credibility is important. I don't like lying. I don't like telling people stories that aren't true or fairy tales. And so anyway, gets me down this rabbit hole of credibility in storytelling is important. And if you're doing a game for an ESPN, and if you're doing one for one of the networks or Amazon Prime or whatever, you're going to have a more or less balanced broadcast. You'll say the good and the bad about each team. Sometimes when you work for a club, you're not really having the same amount of freedom to talk about players in a certain way. And so there's got to be a really good balance with that. But I thought it was important to bring up the fact that if you are working for a club, a team, it is important that you you understand we've got to be delivering team messages. And for us this year, we've started 5 rookies several times. Hadn't been done in the NBA since 1970, and we've done it 3 times this year. Started 5 rookies. We're not going to tell people how fantastic these guys are. Our stories from the very beginning was we have a young team. We lost our star, one of the best NBA players of the era. Our stories are going to be, let's watch these young guys develop. Let's have a 3-year plan. We're going to take our lumps, like the 62-point loss in OKC and the 60-point loss about 4 days ago in Miami. But anyway, we will take our lumps. But the stories are, look at the development. Look at how they've gotten better at shot selection, better at defense, better at this. Look how they came along. So our story the whole year is, hey, you should know our guys. They're cool guys. They're great basketball players. They just need experience. So that's the overall arching storytelling we've done for the entire year. All right, so that's a little tangent. And then we show, after here, one of the things you'll see a lot, like forward keys to the game. You all know there's so much that's sponsored, starting lineups and all that. So we have to get those in. And so this is the first block of the show, is the A block. We take a little bit of a break, and then we come back and look, there's opening billboards. And then we're going to tell a story about Tamani Kamara, a guy from the University of Dayton, by the way, who has been one of the top rookies this year in the NBA. And then what did he do? He's one of our guys, plays so hard, was injury free all year, but now he's out for the year. I think it's an ankle. And so we're telling the story, man, he did all of this stuff. Let's talk to the head coach, Chauncey, and ask him, how do we move on? What do we do without Kamara, who fills that role? So that's the story. And then we come back, almost tip time, another scenic. We're showing the starting lineups. We're setting the coaches and putting a tag about each coach. Then, of course, there's that sponsorship, the first tech, first quarter. We tip the ball, and then we play. And then throughout the game, the things that are in here are some stories. We want to do a story about Chauncey Billups and Jamal Mosley. They both went to the University of Colorado. They were best friends, blah, blah, blah. And now they're coaching against each other. And so these are all in here of things that we need to do within the show. And then I'll just tell you this, with this Haberstat, we have a remote host in our games. He actually is in Charlotte, lives here, and he's giving us the nerdy, geeky stats. What are the numbers saying, kind of a thing. So we have play-by-play person, a game analyst, sideline reporter, and then a stats analyst who comes in remotely. So so when you talk about the day, I will have a meeting with all the talent, with the producer of the pregame, postgame, halftime show, the graphics producer, everybody who's involved will be on a call, and we'll talk about, here are the stories. Here's what we need to set up. Hey, when you're at the arena, Russ, we want to capture Aiton coming in, and we want to capture, excuse me, whoever coming in. And we're going to do an interview with the coach at this time, and we're going to interview a player at this time. And oh, by the way, when the team's doing their warm-ups, we need these players because we're going to focus on them in the pregame show. So have your camera send us shots of guys warming up so we can roll them into our show as if they're live. So we do all that. I haven't been to Charlotte before. I will get there right after this call and figure out where my camera drops are, what assignments are going to be, where's our talent position? Are they on the floor, or are they up in some of them are up in the rafters, and then how do we treat that? So my job is kind of more technical this morning in just figuring out the layout, the setup, the sources, in addition to our cameras. What are we sharing from the home team? Their slash camera, their above the rim cameras, their beauty camera, figure out what all that is and start putting together the technical aspects of the show. And then we'll do our interviews, we'll get our content, we'll do pre-production, and then we do our live hits at 6:30 with our talent back to the studio, and then we'll tape the first 2 blocks and play them back live at 7 o'clock. And then just go through here. Again, we need a McDonald's McDelivery, and we need the Les Schwab doing the right thing, and we need to have the McDonald's 100-point activator and the Moda assist and the Alaska dunk. And so, we've got to be aware that who's paying our salaries, and do the best we can to integrate all that into a show. So it's basically having this roadmap. Here are the stories we're going to tell. At least half the time, the stories that we think we're going to tell, something changes, and it's like, we're not going to do that story because the story's changed on us, or we're not going to do the story because something different has happened, or the circumstances are such that, okay, this isn't the right time to tell that story because we've had other things supersede it, or sometimes it just becomes inappropriate in the game. The game gets too good, so we don't tell a story, or the game's so bad that we don't tell a story, or the game's just, so good that we just want to focus on the game. So the producer comes up with this rundown, comes up with the roadmap, and it stays that way for a couple of blocks, and then it's all over the place. And again, we try to capture what's going on live at that point.
So you
questions
have,
about the rundown?
I gotta have a quick question about the sponsorships, the sponsored. So you have how many hits that you have to absolutely get in because they're sponsored?
That answer is way too many. Because in addition to the ones that come all throughout the game, we call them elevators or sliders. We have the score bug in the bottom of the screen, and these little things come out that say, sign up for Infinity Cable, or Wi-Fi, or we do our own promotions too for our social media. There's a whole team that are doing stories and a series called The Trail, and it's about our basketball team. And so there's a promo for that, the promo for game tickets, and it does vary a lot. We've had a little bit of changeover in Portland in the sales and activation areas. So, boy, one game, I think we had 7 to 9 must get in this show kinds of things. And the next day we only had 3. So, but these full screen things with the dunk of the game, the assist, the doing the right thing, the McDelivery, those are every single game. And so that's hard for the producer to find the time to get that all in and not be interference, obtrusive. And if you watch some NBA games, they'll have the game here, and all of a sudden somebody shooting a free throw, they'll squeeze it back, and then they'll have a box here that has a promo or has a commercial. And we haven't done that yet, but we've got a lot of tickers, lower thirds on the screen. And then so we have to do them coming out of break. So what does that mean? When we go to break, we got to get to the break quickly so we have enough time when we're coming back to do the dunk of the game and not miss any action. So that is a dance in it.
Yeah, got to pay the bills. Question from anyone.
Yes.
They might have a question. Yeah, go ahead,
Hi,
Andrew.
thank you so much for talking with us. How difficult is it for
course.
you to balance like a 4-person broadcast? Like that's about as many people as you're gonna have on a broadcast, really. And obviously talk about like
Yeah.
how they fill different roles. Like how does that like how hard is it for you to like make sure that everyone's getting like enough reps, but you're also not like forcing stuff and like making sure that there's like a good flow to the broadcast between all the different voices?
Yeah, and Andrew, the most important word you said there was forcing something, because I always tell people my sins, my mistakes are not they're not sins of omission for not doing something. It's always sins of commission for doing too much. And so you should not force things. And that's why I said sometimes you have this rundown and you say, oh man, we did the interview, we did the graphics, we did the music, we did the highlights. We're not going to show it because we're not going to force it in there. It just doesn't feel right now. The balancing of the 4 talent, I will say this, that our sideline reporter does one hit where she's on camera, and it's typically after the first time out in the first quarter. She'll do a couple of hits if somebody's injured or has something else to say, or we sometimes find people in the stands who, oh, I came all the way from Taiwan to see the Trailblazers, and so she'll do a little story about that. The best thing, Andrew, the other thing is egos, and we have a great crew with Kevin Calabro, who's an Indiana native, by the way, Lamar Hurd, who played at Oregon State basketball, Brooke, who's a Washington State person, and her father, I think her father was this legendary coach in Washington, and then Tom, who's here in Charlotte. So we try to build in just 2 hits for each of them, and sometimes somebody will get 3 or 4, sometimes we'll get 1, and it's just kind of determined that, hey, it's not, let's just move on, let's just not do that story today. So egos have to be in check as well. We never have Brooke coming in and complaining, and not everybody's like this, by the way, but is never complaining because she didn't get enough airtime. They're all good with the time they get, and I know the producer sometimes like, sorry, Brooke, we're just not going to get your hit in. It's just not going to work. And you have to have the trust between your producer and your talent for that. But it is quite a balance. Yeah, just like in football, the balance between a 2-person or a 3-person booth. The last year I did Broncos preseason, I made it a 3-man booth, and it worked really, really, really well. Actually, the third guy I got in there because I so respected him, and he's an awesome person, former player. I wanted to get him on our broadcasts, and so in a little bit of a time where there was a little bit of a void of leadership in that area, I took the bull by the horns and then said, hey, broadcast partner, I want a 3-person booth. I want Ryan Harris to be our 3rd person in the booth. And again, Ryan's a Notre Dame alum, former football player, fantastic guy. I think he does Westwood One radio as well. So, and same thing, Ryan came in with just such a small ego, and everybody, the other guy we had on ours was Steve Levy, who does NHL hockey on ESPN. And so it was them, and then the third guy who's local to Colorado, and actually would annoy people because he'd talk about the Super Bowl rings he'd won with the Patriots when we don't like the Patriots. And that's why I wanted to get Ryan in there. He's such a big Bronco supporter, Super Bowl champion, and just a champion of a guy. So any of you who are talent, I would say check your ego at the door, and just don't get upset about those things that aren't important. And I do know that I have worked with people who get really upset if they don't get X amount of hits or X amount of face time. And check your ego at the door. Think of the team and the broadcast. And when you force things in, I always regret it, whether it's a graphic, whether it's a shot. And that's what's tough in basketball. You've got to understand how the pace of the game's going. Our team pushes off the floor. Somebody makes a basket. You have the cutaway of the hero who made the basket, and then somebody steals the ball and you missed it because you got a hero over here. So I just really have to balance that. I kind of went down a different rabbit hole, but anyway, it's just all about how the flow of the game changes and the direction of what we're doing changes. And yeah, producers, directors, everybody, talent, really, it's the best if people don't have the ego. That's best if they're all worried about the team and the presentation, not themselves.
Very true. Any other questions before we start to wrap things up? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thanks for being here.
Sure.
I like that you have the kind of rundown because, and I know you've said you've worked with some people who used to work in kind of TV news. I guess I work in like production at WNDU, and so this is like kind of somewhat familiar. But I was wondering, what do you think are kind of the like hardest transitions that you've seen from people that you work with to kind of that more, yeah, like studio news setting to kind of to a game broadcast? Because I imagine that the game broadcast has more kind of, I guess, improvisation mid-game, and yeah, what's that transition like, and what are the kind of added difficulties that come with that?
Yeah, so I did see one, the opposite, where somebody only did live sports, and then he was asked to direct a fireworks show, which was pretty much a 2-hour news commercial. And there's packages and there were roll cues and all that. One of those things that blew my mind is the producer came in, says, here are the scripts. And he just looked at them and said, I don't do scripts, and threw them aside. It's like, and I had experience doing news. I was kind of the AD. And so actually on that show, the director was pretty much parroting me because I'm in the background thinking, I need to save the show because I let it start. And it's like, and so we went here and found this out. And then there was dead silence. So I thought I needed to jump in. So I seen it from that way if you haven't worked it scripted. But I'll tell you, the things that are really important is anticipation and awareness. You know, you have to know the game somewhat. You have to know the players. You have to know tendencies. There are times like when we do this A block, that is scripted. You know, it is. We're going from this point to this point to this point. Go, go, go. In football, you don't know when there's going to be an interception. You don't know which defense is coming, you know, what defense they're going to be in and all that. So you do have to be flexible. You can't rely on script, but what you have to rely on, one of the most important skills in being a director is listening. You have to listen. And it's hard when everything else is going on around you and you're talking to the camera people and the tape people and the graphics people, and they're talking to you, and yet and the producer's doing this over here, yeah, 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 and the game's going on. You have to listen to the talent. One of the things I think Jacob asked earlier about the producer-director relationship, and again, this year, just being honest, with us both being new in our role with this team, we were chasing a lot. And that bothers me. I don't like chasing. But if the you know, the talent says, oh, this happened, oh, we got to show, and then it's a fire drill every time. I think we should be leading people a lot of times. And again, as a director, listen to what your talent's talking about and make that the story. If a sub's coming in, my tendency, show a shot of the subs coming in, and we're really good at doing that. But I do that too much because our talent may be talking about, hey, Scoot Henderson, blah, 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 blah. And I hear the, sub's coming in. Well, now all of a sudden I've cut away from Scoot to the guy that's coming in. Now I'm changing the story, and I shouldn't do that. He's talking about Scoot. I need to stay on Scoot Henderson. And so I think what I can tell you is the best thing to do is to listen. And of course, prep your camera people. They have the program in their headset as well. And you need to give them the freedom to say, hey, if they start talking about Chauncey Billups, camera 2, get a shot of Chauncey Billups, our coach. Or if they're talking about all the injuries, let's check pregame. I say, all right, camera 2, camera 5, here are some of our guys on the bench. These are the guys that are injured. So when our talent talks about injuries to this team, I want you to go get that shot. So you talk about it, you anticipate what some of the things are. But again, you have to listen.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ari. Thank you. And Russ, I don't know if you have any time to watch much of the NCAA, but they did very similar to that. They were talking about the North Carolina State coach, Kevin Keats, and he made the joke that he really polishes his shoes because he wants them to look like referee shoes. And the talent was talking about that. And 2 seconds later, they take a shot of the coach's shoes. So somebody was listening and they got the cue to make sure that they got that shot. So that kind of leads exactly what you were talking about, everybody listening to what is being mentioned during that broadcast.
Yeah, and the producer has to be aware of what the technical aspects are. I talked earlier today, I'll go and figure out which cameras I share. If I share a camera, that means they don't get a tally when I take them typically. And it's a risk when I take their camera that they can do a whip pan, because I'm thinking, oh, there's a hero, take 7. And then the home truck is saying, oh, give me the coach. So it's on my air and they whip off. I say that because the producer I work with now will sometimes, oh, that's guy. I said, not ours. I don't trust it. And there have been times to either prove or to show that or to please. I said, okay, take 7. And it's like, that's why I don't like to take that camera. So producers have to understand what the technical aspects are, what the camera assignments are. And just because she thinks it can't happen immediately. It starts with, I can't read the mind. And then when you tell me what to do, okay, well, these cameras now have other assignments. And so I have to break them from that assignment to get there. And we had something the other day, which right at the tip, somebody knocked the ball into the seats. And the guy who got it had this really weird coat on. And our talent talked about, where's the coat? Where's the coat? Where's the coat? Our camera location couldn't show anything that was significant there. But we're chasing something, and if the producer understands, oh, it's not in an area that we can shoot it, or oh, they're talking NBA championship, shoot the banners. It's like, they're behind our camera people. We have no one who can shoot those, and so it's really important that the producer understands the technical aspects of it as well, so that they have a better understanding of why or why not something happens sometimes. But I did that too, or somebody, hey, they're coming down the court holding their fingers. Camera people need to show me that as well, whether the talent said it or not. And sometimes we'll show things that the talent did not see. It's like, oh, it looks like he's holding his fingers. He must have gotten, jammed on the last play. So, and if you're a camera operator, my best advice for that is look around your viewfinder. When you're looking at a camera, you see this view. When you look around, you expand. And I can only see what the cameras are showing me. So it helps if they look around. Oh, there's a fan going crazy. I'll remember that after the next basket and things like that. So again, everybody rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, good point. One last question before we wrap it up. Anybody have one more last question? Yeah, go ahead, Ryan.
Well, first, thank you for being with us, and just kind of want to follow up on what you were just talking about like sharing cameras, camera assignments with that. I guess twofold question here. How many cameras do you tend to share in a broadcast, or rather, how many would you like use that aren't your own? And building off of that, when you do have that moment, like where you see somebody wearing something crazy, or you need to shoot the banner, are you typically the one to break the assignments, or is it kind of like,
yes,
how do you prevent every other camera that's not live from going to that one thing? And on the other end of that, do cameras ever lead that, I guess, storytelling? Like if you see something on camera, do you ever cut to that and then have talent follow their direction on that?
Yes, because again, if the ball's being pushed up the court and somebody's laying down there because he got poked in the eye or whatever, talent may miss it. And so, yeah, cameras can lead some of that storytelling. In this day and age of budget cuts with Bally Sports, there are fewer cameras available. We are in Charlotte will hire 5 camera operators and have 5-man cameras. And that's rare. There's only about 3 or 4 teams in the league that will hire that much. When they come into the Moda Center, most of them are hiring 3 cameras, and they're taking cameras from us. And so we have, I'll just give real quickly, 1, and this is typical numbering. 1 is a game camera, 2 is tight follow, 3 and 4 are left and right end zone, 5 is the slash camera that kind of gets that corner angle. So then we'll take their slash. We each put out 1 slash. So we take their slash. We'll take above the rim cameras too, if they have them. We'll take a beauty camera. Some have, at home, I have a mid-court handheld. Oh, maybe 3 venues have that. Other venues might have an RF camera. We had a hallway camera somewhere, Atlanta maybe. So we look to see what resources they have and then share whatever we can. Some of the cameras are fixed on the back of the backboard. So when somebody shoots a free throw, you have that shot with the basket here, them small there. Others have those manually operated, or you have a robotic camera operator above the rim. Some venues have 2 operators, 2 cameras. Some have 2 cameras, 1 operator. Some only have 1 above the rim. So that's why in a day like today, where I haven't been to Charlotte, I got a list of their available cameras, but let's go see what it truly we can share and how to make our production better. We in Portland have a great production setup in that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have the mid-court handheld. We have 2 above the rims. We have 1 behind the glass. By the time it's all said and done, with what we have and what we share, it's probably a 15 to 20 camera shoot for these games, which is a lot. Sometimes that's too much. And when I first started, I'll be honest, most of the shows I was doing was 5 cameras, and all of a sudden now I have 15. It took a little while for me to know how to utilize them. I use the above the rim cameras as the action's going away from me more than a lot of people. I think for all y'all, that is the kind of the NBA 2K kind of look, just like Skycam in football. If you use that live, some people love it, some people hate it, but the younger audience, they're used to seeing that because of their when they play video games, that's the look they have. So I've been using the above the rim cameras a lot more for live action, and most often that operator who has a monitor, not a tally, but a monitor, he should look to see, oh, they're on me. I had several of them recently tell me, wow, you use me a lot more than my own director does. Thanks. Because everybody likes to get, talk about talent and wanting to get tallies. So do camera people. They love to get on there often. So anyway, and I try to mix up. That's the other thing I'll tell you real quickly. I try to do a variety of things and not be so predictable. There's a shot, there's a hero, there's a secondary hero, back to the game action. But I try to vary it up. I'll use my my mid-court handheld to do play-by-play once in a while. Okay, so we make a shot at one end, tight shot of the hero, cut into camera 6, follow it up, stay wide, and do play-by-play. I'll use camera 5, which is splash, usually a hero shot, sometimes wider, sometimes tighter. Backside free throws, after the free throw, you can push to the guy who made the basket, push to the ball coming up, or do play-by-play as they come at you. And depending on the moment, how I'm feeling, I'll mix that up a little bit. So I think, to me, variety is really important. I don't like, not that it matters, but I don't like watching games where it's so predictable what the next shot's going to be. So I try to give, and you try to give the audience, as great a look as they can have for everything without compromising the game. But, soccer, you better stay wide 95% of the time. To me, when I first started, it's like, oh, you just get the guys in the middle a little bit tighter. It's like, no, you got to stay wide, because that's how everything develops. And if you know soccer, it has to be wide all the time. And you don't cut very often, and the clock doesn't stop, and all that. So you always have to give the audience what they want to see. Don't miss a play, don't miss a tip, don't miss a, to me, I always say don't miss a free throw, but our producer's saying, it's okay. It's a 20-point game. Nobody cares about a free throw. Let's stay off that and keep showing this video or keep telling this story. So, yeah, so I don't know if I answered all the questions, Ryan, but we typically they'll share with us when they come in the handheld closest to our bench, our slash camera, which is opposite theirs, and our game camera. So they're, because one's always following the game. Those are the 3 biggest shares every time somebody comes in. Then they'll take our mid-court handheld. They'll do our above the glass robos. They'll do behind the glass Marshall. They'll do beauty. So we're giving, I don't know, 7 or 8 feeds to them, 3 of which are manned with, we try to tally them together. So and I see this in my truck, when we're at home and the visitor's taking my slash camera, I should get a green tally to show that he's on their air. So I can't say, hey, 5, get me the shot, because he's working for the other team at that point, and we don't want to, mess up anybody's production by doing those big swishes on air. That's bad.
The dreaded
Happens way too often because I take a lot of risks, and I probably shouldn't, but I take a lot of risks, and sometimes it's not a good thing to do.
no risk, no reward. You know how that is.
Exactly.
All right. As we wrap it up, as I mentioned to you earlier, Russ, most of the students are getting experience in this field, behind the camera, in front of the camera. But as we wrap it up, what advice would you give the students about what they want to do, where they want to go, and how they're going to get there?
Advice is to stick with it, stay with it. I have several times taken a step backwards to move forward. It's not always easy to do, whether it's financially or or otherwise. But if that is your passion, stay true to it and follow through with it. Again, after undergrad, I had a job doing videos, but they were training videos for a company. That's not what I want to do. I want to do live sports. Went to grad school, got the opportunity after that. And again, I've taken steps back in my life to be able to move forward. Be patient is another one. My son, who I said is a TD, I think since he was 24, he wants my job, and he's 34 now and does a lot of great national shows. He's very good at what he does, but he wants to be a director. And I'm not sure if he's happy for me or mad that I got the job with the Trailblazers, because I think he'd rather get the job with the Trailblazers. And he has been working in the NBA for 6, 7, 8 years with the Pacers. So perseverance and patience, look for those opportunities. I'm not sure what the landscape is there at Notre Dame or other places. I used to always say this in a very kind way, is sometimes you have to give it away before somebody's going to pay you for it. And so those are internships, and those are making those connections. I think some things have changed where you can't do an unpaid internship and all, but the point is you need to do the lower level jobs and learn more and more about it. You know, I ran camera, I did graphics, I was a replay guy. I've done most roles in a TV truck. That makes me better at my job because I understand what they're going through and what's a good ask and what's a bad ask because of that. So let's see, patience, perseverance, look for those opportunities in whatever they are. You know, just, you do have to make sacrifices in this industry. Sports are played on the weekends, sports are played in the evenings. So, you know, obviously don't expect 9 to 5, but have passion for what you do, and it'll all work out. And you know, keep pushing forward, but also be patient in that career development. And treat people well always. You know, people want to work with good people. I do know it's nice that some people are at a point where it's like, yeah, I was offered to work a week, but I don't like their producer, so I said no. Or, hey, we need a replay operator. Oh yeah, that guy's too difficult. I don't want to work with him. Hire somebody else. And then this is a big line for those who are athletes. Your best ability is availability. And so, or the other one is you can't make the club from the tub. But it's the same thing. You need to be available. I made a lot of sacrifices and said yes. When people called and asked me to work, I had to change things or give up personal time or family time to do that. You need to decide how much of that you can or can't do. But I think that I kept getting called back to do Reds as just an independent contractor on game day because I was always available, because I said yes. And then when you commit to something, in my opinion, stay with that commitment. Don't, this happened to me too. Hey, I'm doing scoreboard production, whatever. Camera was $200. And it's like, oh, I got a call from Fox. They want me to run camera for the main broadcast, which would pay 2.5 times more. And I say, hey, no, I already committed to this. So I'm not gonna tell them no because you're desperate at the last minute. So I know that's a bunch of words I just said, but I think patience and perseverance are the best ones that you need to have in getting involved and having good relationships with people in the process.
Yes. Yes. Be nice. Be kind.
Be nice. Be kind. Put your ego somewhere else. I have an ego, no question, but don't let the ego get in the way of doing a good job. That's all.
And if you didn't have an ego, you wouldn't be in the business that we're all in. I mean, you have to kind of put your ego out there to have the nerve to stand up and talk in front of hundreds, thousands of people. So Russ, it's so good to see you. It's been too long since I've seen you, and I'm so thrilled that you're being able to, you know, travel and do the Trailblazers, and, you know, whatever your next step is, wish you all the best. Thank you so much for your time.